Since we're a railroad town, we feel like that's the best way to start our meetings. Well, welcome everyone. This is the last lecture that we have with the Ennis Heritage Society for this season. And we're very glad to see so many folks here and visitors. Glad to have you all here. And we'll get on with our program. For those of you who aren't familiar with what we do, we always start our programs with an invocation. So if you'll join me and bow your heads, please. Gracious God, thank you for this day and the time we have together. Teach us to respect your creation, honor those who came before us, and treat each other with kindness and grace. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Again, thank you all for coming. And I also want to thank the Ennis Public Library for making this space available to us. It's a wonderful community gathering space. If you've been here before, you'll notice as wonderful as this space is, we have trouble controlling the lights. So we thought we'd turn things around tonight so that we don't have the overhead lights. We don't have the room completely dark and don't have the overhead lights blocking the slide presentation. But we still appreciate the library being here. We also want to, I've been remiss in the past of not thanking our sponsors. We have a few gold sponsors that support our programs, and we have a sign up about them, and that is, Bryce Anderson and Joyce Lindauer's Legal Services. Thank you it's over there. You'll see it on the way in. And then another special treat for us tonight is that we happen to have Mayor Renee Jones of the city of Alma here, which is pretty wonderful. I think that's great. So we've had programs on Ennis and the mayor hasn't shown up, so I think that's really nice of you to be here. Thank you. Thank you very much. A couple of other announcements before we start. We have two more events later this year in April and in May, but they're both member events. So if you care to join, we can take care of that at the entry table. We also are helping to sponsor an art program with the City of Ennis being held at the Visitor Center, the Welcome Center here in Ennis during the month of April during Bluebonnet Tours. So I would encourage you to visit that. And then the library is sponsoring a program that I think would be of interest to us here, and that is a program on the Texas Midland Railroad, and that is happening here in this room on Saturday, March 28th at 11 a.m. So make yourself available for that. I'm sure it'll be an interesting program. So then, without further ado, I'll introduce our speaker tonight. And I guess my first question would be, who all here has ever been to or through Alma? Okay. Well, I want to mention to you all that the operative there is through Alma, because literally you go through the historic heart of Alma when you visit it. And our speaker tonight has devoted his entire life pretty much to documenting the history of that town that he's from, and has gotten to know pretty much everything there is to know about the last 175 years that the community has been there. The people, the places, at a time when farming communities made up of small family farms were that a size a family could eke out a living on, and close enough to some place where they could bring their goods to market, where that kind of community lived all across the state and all across the country. And that pretty much is gone. And Bruce Fowler, our speaker, has devoted his life to learning about his hometown, and he's here to share that with you tonight. So without further ado, I welcome Bruce Fowler.
Thank you, David. I want to thank you all for being here. This is about the town where I grew up, and my family has lived for 6 generations. When I was small, gotta do the picture. Okay. First I should say, this is a news clipping from when I gave this presentation, which was a slideshow in 1978. And it all started because of the bicentennial in 1976. And there was a covered dish supper, slides of the history of Alma Friday night. It was an earlier time. So anyhow, I'll move on. I was small, as you can see. I'm on the left. This is me on the left and my brother Van. Our world changed, and this talk is about Alma, before and after Interstate 45 was built. My grandmother, Alice Whitfield, I need to print better, grew up in Alma, as did her friend, Miss Mary Zerver. Oh, these are some other slides. David, are these focused?
Not really.
But yes. You want me to do that?
Yeah, I'd rather you do that.
Okay. All right.
David's the tech guy. He really does the IT. So these are photographs when the road was being built. That's Jan on the left, Jan Carnes Glaspie, and I believe that's you, Susan, in the middle. That's Susan Whitfield Slovak, and then that's Linda Whitfield Waldrop on the right. And then I can't really see from here because of the focus, but that's 2 other photographs of y'all on the left. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, this is my grandmother, or our grandmother, Alice Whitfield. She was born in 1889 and she died in 1985, and that's Miss Mary Zerver. And they were lifelong residents of Alma, and because of them, many, many stories were passed down to me and to my cousins and our family about what life had been like in the 1800s and in the early 1900s and whatever was yesterday as well as today. So if we could move on to the next one. Where's the watermark?
Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Okay. These are the 7 slides that Miss Mary Zerver gave me about 1970. And the central one is the depot. The one to the right is the business street. The one to the left is the Laura Ruffin house, which at the time, which was 1909. Miss Mary took these slides in 1909 with a Brownie Kodak box camera, just like this. I just want to mention that the Zerver farm is on the right, and the house is only 3 rooms. It was built in 1887, and the barn was built in 1900. And it's so big because that was where they stored all their hay, and that's where their livelihood came from. The cotton yard is in the middle because, as you will see, cotton was very, very, very important. The Catholic Church is on the left. Dr. Germany's house is in the center, and we all knew it as Eli and Cora Rogers' house, which their daughter Eva lived in later. This is a slide that Miss Mary took in 1909 of the cotton yard. Well, we grew up on the cotton yard, and our grandparents bought it in the 1940s and then subdivided it into 4 different sections. And then my cousin's father, James Whitfield, built his house there, and my father, Percy Fowler, built his house there. And then the other 2 lots, my aunt and uncle did not. They built their houses elsewhere. So I was very familiar with the cotton yard, even though it didn't look like this when I was growing up. But there was cotton growing in the ground on the north side of our house and on the east side of the house. So if we,
Across the street from the Catholic Church.
right. These are just some overviews to give you an idea of how many buildings used to be in Alma. The photograph on the upper left is looking north from the Gin Tower. On the upper right is looking east from the Gin Tower. And then from the lower photograph, it's looking south towards Alma from the Fowler front porch. This is a photograph taken in 1948 by my cousin Donald Fowler when he was 15 years old. And it shows quite a few things about the town before the freeway. You can see the railroad track. You can see this street, which is First Street, was the Blacktop Highway, the main auto route from Dallas to Houston. And it was very busy. My dad said that it was just a constant line of cars, so I'm surprised that when he got this photograph, there's hardly anybody on it. I could point out the store buildings in the upper right. Our grandmother's house was just south of that, just below it. The Methodist church is over here in the upper left. The Catholic church is off screen. We have a good photograph, another one of it. Okay, let's move on to the next one. When people settled in small towns, they had to have water. And the early water sources were the creeks and the Willow Pond. The first well in the Alma area was dug in 1870 by Mr. Gilmore, who was living on the farm that is now, well, it was, the last I knew, it belonged to Lawrence Slovacek, but I believe a man named Volek owns it now. Two wells in town that never went dry were the well behind the stores and the well behind my grandmother's garage. They had never gone dry. Then the other source of water were man-made tanks. And this is a tank that Ben Whitfield dug on the west side of the railroad, and he dug this tank with teams of mules and what was called a scoop. It was a big metal scoop that the mules pulled. To get a little bit into the early history of Alma, you have to understand that the Willow Pond, which my grandmother told me many, many times, is why people were there. It was next to, or this house in the upper left, which was built by Thomas Smith, and this house in the lower left is a house in Palmer that is from the same time period and can show you more what the front was like, because that's the only photograph that we have of the house that was Thomas Smith's. The Smith family is in the upper right, and the man in the center is John O. Smith. He was 17 years old when his parents, Thomas and Margaret Smith, came from Tennessee to settle in, well, what in 1848 was still Navarro County. This is Jesse Horace Curlin, well, Jesse Horace and Sarah Elizabeth McGill Curlin, about 1868 from Marshall, Texas. And they are our great-great-grandparents. And there was a brutal war that was going on 1861 to 1865, and they were living in one of the most prosperous cities in Texas called Marshall. It was over in East Texas, and Reconstruction was going on, and the things that were happening during Reconstruction in Marshall were so bad that they were reported in Horace Greeley's newspaper in New York City. So you don't realize how extenuating things were. Anyhow, they wanted to get out of Dodge. And so they lived about 2 blocks from the courthouse square where the stagecoach stop was at the Marshall House, I think was the name of the hotel. And I guess they were down there talking to somebody one day, and they found out about this man who had a stagecoach stop, at Willow Pond over in the far west, because that's how in the old letters they talk about they moved to the west. And of course, that's where we are right now. So anyhow, they traded. The Curlins had a house 2 blocks from downtown courthouse in Marshall and some land, and they traded that for 200 acres and the house at Willow Pond. So that's sort of some early history. This is the only shot that I have of the Tebow house. The Tebows, Vernon J. and Ida Horton Tebow, are buried in Myrtle Cemetery. And he was the postmaster at Alma in the 1880s, and he was a postmaster in Ennis also. But in 1880, Mr. Tebow sold his farm to Lewis Perry Lindell. And so what we knew as the Lindell place was the Tebow place. And like I said, this is the only photograph of the house. It burned in 1914, but it was rather Victorian with polygonal shaped rooms on either end. This is the central porch that you see that went between the rooms. The people in the carriage, or the buggy rather, I think it's a buckboard, were, I think that's either Maggie or Evie Lindell and one of her brothers, because the Lindells bought the house, and this was taken before it burned. Next slide, please. This is a slide of the plat that was done after 1881 of Alma, and it shows its relationship to the railroad. Let's go on. So now we're going to go to transportation, because to get to Alma, you had to either go on foot, my grandmother's boot there, or on horseback, or by covered wagon, stagecoach, train, or the sketch that I did in the center is the Interurban Depot, which was an electric railway that came through in 1911. So those were the ways that you could get to Alma. If we go to the next slide, these are some literal photographs of it. You could also come by pushcart if you wanted to, and that's Jan. It's my little brother with the stagecoach. You know, in the 50s, everything was about westerns, and all the kids had toys like that. These two ladies are standing on the railroad track down south of Alma. And if we go on to the next slide, there were other ways later of getting to Alma, and I didn't realize that they had motorcycles back then. But this is one of the Lindells with a very early motorcycle on the Willow Pond Bridge. And then this is Arthur Lindell with his motorcycle with a sidecar. And that's Eva Rogers in the upper left in the car in the center. And that's Mr. Everett's on the right. The road in the center is the Milford Porter's Bluff Road. And the Milford Porter's Bluff Road, y'all know where Milford is, but Porter's Bluff was on the Trinity River. So that was basically the road that traversed east-west. And then you had like I said earlier, the north-south road. We could go on to the next. Of course, the train was the way a lot of people got there, because at that time, passenger service was very available, and people just used the train. This is a slide showing the depot with the Whitfield Trudaway house behind it, and then the Fowler and Bastion houses to the left. Train travel wasn't always safe, even then. And there was a train wreck. I'm just amazed that we have a photograph of it. But someone in Alma took a photograph of the train wreck that happened down around the curve. And the curve was just south of Alma going towards Rice. If you could go back for just a second, I just want to point out that the house on the left of the railroad track was the Whitfield Trudaway house that I've talked about. Next one. The interurban was the other way of moving around, and it was amazing because I remember during the gas crisis of 1973, that I was commuting to the University of Texas at Arlington, and I asked my parents, why don't we have the interurban anymore? Because my dad went to school on the interurban. He went to school in Ennis, and they were able to go to Dallas and Corsicana and all, just a fast, efficient electric railway. Well, I didn't know, they didn't know why it was taken out. And my mom said, well, it was right before the war and they really needed it then. But I found out later, watching a PBS special, why it was taken out. It was a group of corporations, and I'm going to name them. It was, I believe it was General Motors and Standard Oil and Goodyear Rubber, and I'm not sure who all else. But it was a group of corporations. It's very well documented. There's even photographs, films of Los Angeles used to have the biggest mass transit system in the nation, and there's photographs of the mass transit cars in LA being picked up by claw, piled into piles, and burned because they knew that people would demand that they come back. Well, the reason, of course, that they were taken out was because people wanted to sell cars. So anyhow, that's my little story. But I do want to also say that the little building in the center, when I was a kid, that was the shower house at my grandparents' house. But I'm so grateful that Annette took a picture of it before it was torn down. It was actually one of very, very many little waiting stations that were all along the track for people who were waiting for the interurban to have a place to get in out of the cold. And after they closed the interurban, people bought those and used them for all kinds of possibilities. And of course, that's an interurban car. 1911 was very important because it allowed people to have electricity in their home. And out in the country, in a little small town, to have electricity was really very special. So that's one of the big advantages that came from it. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, there's a lot to talk about, and so please forgive me if I... This was the main, what was called Front Street in downtown Alma, and this photograph was one that Miss Mary took in 1909. And the Whitfield Mercantile, that was Martin Robert Whitfield, it was always called the Double Store, and it was two store buildings that somewhere here I have a note that fire in 1894 burned Martin Whitfield's general store, their house, Sharp's Grocery, Ben Whitfield's farm implement store, the drugstore that was run by Harry Reid, and then this store was built after 1894. So I want to mention that there's the Whitfield store, and then there's the Cotton Gin, which you can see the smokestack in the background, and that was founded in 1902 by Ben and Delma Whitfield. And then the first, oh, he's got a pointer. The first store building on Lot 10 was Benedict Fowler's store, and it was where the post office was, and it was purchased in 1890 from W.W. Butts. And the next one was the W.W. Erkenbrack Cafe. Then the next one was the Willis store, and the Willis store had an ornate soda fountain, which was later in Ennis at the ice cream shop. At the Inside Scoop, yes, yes. And it also had an ice house in the back, and there was a meat market next door, and then the next building was the store of J. Luther Stewart. And Mr. Stewart's started his store in 1908, and this photograph was taken in 1909. I think the next slide will show you after the brick buildings. But the only brick building in 1909 was the Alma State Bank. And then the next building was G.W. Collard's General Store. The next building was C.H. Kendrick's General Store. The next building was a public telephone booth. And the next one, which we'll show in the other one, was the telephone exchange. But you can see the Bell Telephone on that post. This is just to show you, this is pre-1900, what people looked like, what clothes they wore. These were the people, these were all Alma people. These were people that you would have seen on the street. Next slide. Now, after 1900, things had changed, and these were fashions, and these people all lived in Alma, and you would have seen them on the streets of Alma. Then the stores on Front Street. Martin and Lena Whitfield had the double store, and thanks to Sugar Glaspie, that is a receipt that some merchandiser had sent something to Grandpa Mart, and I got it from Sugar when she had those things, documents. And that's a photograph of the interior of the store. And the reason there are oranges in that scoop is that the scoop is actually from their store, and it used to be supported by 3 chains that were from a scale. And I have the credit book of Grandpa Mart, and in it says Mrs. Bastian came in and bought some oranges, or put them on credit. So that's why the oranges are there. The book in the center is from the telephone exchange. Okay, this is the interior of the M. Whitfield store on the right, and of the R.M. Whitfield General Store on the left. Next slide, please. This is the Alma State Bank, and a lot of people don't even know that Alma had a bank, but it did until 1929, and it was the only brick building in 1909. Those wooden brackets were the supports on the shelf that you would go in to write a check on. And those black boxes were bank boxes of individuals. I happen to have those. I think I've got about 5 of them. But everybody had a bank box down at the bank where they stored their papers and things. This is the individual receipts book. And those I didn't realize they had personalized checks, but M. Whitfield had a personalized check for his business. And then that's a deed from C.C. Hemming, who was the first person who laid out the town. And then those are all checks. Next slide. This is a sketch that I did of this is the photograph, and it was difficult to see, so I did that sketch of it's the same businesses, basically. The store and post office of B.J. Fowler, then the W.W. Erkenbracht Cafe, but you can see that it was a single-story brick building. The first store is pressed tin to look like stone. It's a wood building, but it's got pressed tin over it. The second and third buildings are brick buildings, and we used to play in those when we were kids, and they were so cool. It was all concrete and brick, and it was a very cool space to be in.
Mr. Stewart's.
Excuse me?
Mr. Stewart's store was still open.
Right. I'm getting there. The first 2 buildings, the first 3 doors were the W.W. Erkenbracht Cafe again. The next 3 doors were the Willis store. The soda fountain was in there. And then the next door was J. Luther Stewart's store. And it was the only store that had the windows that come in and a deep set entrance, because I can remember playing in that entrance after the store closed. And then the next store, actually it's not a store, it's the bank, is the next building. And then the next one is G.W. Collard's, and then the next one is still Kendrick's. And that building on the end is the telephone exchange. It was where the telephones were. This is amazing to me that we have a photograph of the lady who operated the telephone exchange at Alma. Her name was Nora Boggs, and after she this is about 1910. And we have that book in the center, which is a book when you open it, it's all the different kinds of telegrams you could send for every occasion. And then the 3 glass insulators are from the telephone poles that were outside. And what you can't see very well in that slide is this. It's the 1918 Ennis telephone book, but there's a section on Alma, and it has all the people who had telephones listed. So I'll put this over here. That was my Uncle Dorsey Fowler with a radio set, a crystal radio set that he built in the 20s. And we don't have many interior photos because of you needing bright light and all. So I'm pretty amazed that we ended up with an interior photo of the old house that was up in the fields. Okay, this is J. Luther Stewart with his grocery store. You can see grandmother's house in the background faintly. That's another photograph of Mr. Stewart and his store. And then the lower right is Ruffin's Grocery, which was the old interurban building. And when they closed the interurban, Mr. Ruffin opened a store, and his wife, Iola, ran the post office. And when we, yeah, in the grocery store. And when we get to the military, I'm going to say that I asked my parents, where were you on December 7th, 1941? And my father, Percy Fowler, was in front of the Alma State Bank playing dominoes, and that Alvy Ruffin heard on the radio. Alvy had a small store, and that's that store, and he came over and told about the Japanese attack on Sunday, December 7th, 1941. It was a real, you were there. And I asked my mother where she was, and she said she was in the living room at her parents' house, which is that house at the end of the street. Okay. This is the filling station. We always call it a filling station. This is the filling station, and then that is Benton's store on the upper right. And you can actually see the gable of the house behind, which was where the Bentons, it was the Whitfield Treadaway house, but it was then where the Bentons built their house, and they were actually living in it at that time because their land went all the way through. Next slide. Okay, the next topic is industry and agriculture, and of course cotton, I've already mentioned, was the biggest thing, but those are various things about cotton. This is agricultural slides that relate to agriculture. One of the Zervers, I believe, with a couple of mules. Mules were very important in the farm then. And the man just to the right of the boy with the 2 mules is, I think he's killing a goose, because underneath the picture or on the back of the picture it said Christmas dinner. and it's one of the Baldridges. I know it came from I was so fortunate that people allowed me to copy these photographs, and the Baldridge album is where that came from. I have quite a few photos from the Baldridge album. And then the next one of the chickens, everybody in Alma raised chickens. And then the photograph on the right was hog killing time, and it was at the Slovacek place. And then the lower left, look how big that hog was. A lot of bacon. And then the center slide is my granddad, John Fowler, plowing with horses. And I showed this at another event, and they were surprised that he was using horses, because normally you would have used mules. But that is Prince on this side, who was one of their favorite prime pet horses. And so I guess that's why Granddad had a photograph of it made. And then on the right, that is actually the plow that he's on. Next slide, please. Well, there was a lot of cotton to pick, and I'm sure it wasn't easy. But this is a photograph that came from the lindels of cotton picking. Look at all the cotton. This was on the cotton yard at Alma, and I believe it's the cotton yard where the Wilsons live now. It'd be just, I'm trying to think of ways to explain it. It would be just west of the railroad track. And I didn't even realize that all those houses were there until I found this photograph. And I just want to say one more thing. Look at the type of equipment that they used, the wagon, to haul the bales of cotton. This is the Whitfield Bastion Fowler gin. And Ben and Delma Whitfield took out a loan to build this gin in 1902. And I found the papers on it in Waxahachie. I'd heard about the gin, but I didn't know exactly where it was, and I had no photograph of it. The only photograph I had of it was in the middle of that picture that Miss Mary had taken in 1909. But we were in Kentucky at a family reunion, and a distant relative had this picture. We were all exchanging pictures, and he said, this is it actually was written on it, gin in Texas, Ellis County, Texas. And as soon as I saw it, I knew that was our gin, because you can compare the buildings and the smokestack and the tower and just the way. So I was so delighted to have gotten that photograph. This was the Wright gin, which was, I believe, where we knew the Reeves place being, and I think that that's where the Wright gin was, because the Wrights lived on that side of the road. And all of those people are identified. This is a slide that came from the genealogical website, Ellis County, but it's from the Wright family. Next slide, please. This is the Alma Gin Company, which is the only gin that I really remember, and it was there in Alma where Kyle Wilson, that's who lives there now. At the time that these photographs were made, Andy Whitfield and Ike Whitfield owned the gin, and my mother told me that Uncle Ike had come down and asked her to go to the gin and take photographs of the amount of cotton that they had at the gin, because evidently they had a really good crop that year, and the lot was just full of wagons with gin, with cotton in it. Okay, schools, churches, and activities. In the center, lower center, that's the school bell from the Alma School, from the 1912 school. And there's a diploma from the Alma School that says Ermelie Whitfield on it. And these are all Alma School photographs. And in the center, upper center, is the dictionary from the school. I think it's a 1934 edition. And then on top of that is a very early school photo, like in the 1800s, and it was taken outdoors. There are so many Alma school pictures, because if you think about it, there should be about 68 of them, because for every year that they had school, they took a school picture. And we've got a lot of them. Okay, this is the 1912 school that you can read the trustees. The architect was M.L. Waller. Unfortunately, I can't read the contractor because of the thermostat. But I do want to point out that my cousin Jan, I showed this photograph at a family reunion, because the whole family was from Alma pretty much. And she pointed out, look at that little boy. That little boy is catching a baseball. And then she pointed out, there's the ball. And I just thought, what a moment in time to have been caught. So these are various slides of basketball, men and our boys and girls, the Spirit of Alma, which I believe that's Cecilia Lindell's what I've been told next to the wheel. The boys on the right have the basketball with 1916 written on it. The photograph on the left is something that amazes me because I had always heard that there was an auditorium in the Alma School. Well, lo and behold, this is a photograph of the auditorium and the raised stage that was at the end. And of course, it was all gone before I was born. In 1970, what was left of the Alma School burned. It's where the community center is now. I found those 2 ink bottles out at the back of the property, basically where the trash pile was, I'm sure. And so this is when the school burned, July 1st, 1970. There were 3 churches in Alma. There was the Methodist Church, the Methodist Episcopal Church, there was the Union Church, and there was St. Vincent's Catholic Church. And these prints of the Sacred Heart of Jesus and Sacred Heart of Mary used to hang over the side altars of the Catholic Church. And then the candlesticks were on the altar of the Catholic Church. And then the man in the lower right is Reverend James Peter Francis Hughes. He was a Baptist minister, and he preached at the Union Church. And then that's his Bible, and then that's the Catholic Bible. Next slide. This is the Methodist Church, the Methodist Episcopal Church. As you can read, it was built in 1881 on Reynolds Hill, which was southeast of Alma, and it was moved in 1905 onto Block 8 of Alma, and I just barely remember that. Do y'all remember the church?
The church, yeah. We used to get communion in there.
No, the Methodist Church.
Oh, no. I don't remember.
Yeah, I remember the Catholic Church, but I don't remember the...
So where is this?
Excuse me?
Where is this?
This is the Methodist.
I know, but where is it?
It was right across from Miss Rogers' house. It was actually right next to the Rogers house, and then...
When you say Rogers, are you talking about Bobby and Donnie?
Yes. But this is the only photograph that I have of the Methodist Church. And this is the only photograph that I have of the Union Church. And the only reason we have this photograph is because it was used as a school, and I think that's a school photograph. The front doors are behind those people at the upper left, and it was the only 2-story wooden building in Alma, so that's why I know it was the Union Church. Next slide. In 1929, a tornado came through and blew the Catholic Church off of its foundation and obviously blew the tower over. And the upper right was after the reconstruction. Next. Bishop Lynch, who was, you might have heard of Bishop Lynch School in Dallas. That's Bishop Lynch in the center. And he preached a mission at Alma. Well, it must have been before 1904, because it was because of the attendance that he saw that they founded the St. Vincent de Paul at Alma. As boys' communion and girls' communion, and then Miss Mary Zerver took photographs of people all over town, and I believe that's Vivian Whitfield on the right and Flora Whitfield on the left in the 20s when they made their communion. Leisure activities: fishing, hunting, socializing, picnicking, and just generally goofing off, and swimming. That's what people used to do. Okay, homes. There was only one house on this map in 1914 when Hicks McCandless did the map, and that was the George Collard house right across from the school. And so what I've done is I've located 66 houses and put them on the map, and 3 churches and 3 gyms and some other features. So now we've got a record of what used to be there. Next slide, please. These are all things from Alma houses, and the wallpaper in the center was the parlor wallpaper in the Bastion house in 1912. These are there were basically just a few types of houses in Alma. There was a 2-room house, a 3-room T-plan house, the I house, the 4-room cross gable house, and then your basic bungalow. And those were the basic early house forms in Alma. These are some specific ones. That was the Dr. Lacey house, the Reed house, the Phelps house, and this was the old Fowler house up in the fields. These are T-plan houses, with the one on the right being a very simplified house, the one on the left being a more elaborate version of it. Cross-plan house on the lower right, very simplified, a more elaborate version on the left. The Zerver house, that T-plan house, was the basic trailer house of its day. It was the settler's cottage that pretty much was quick housing. But then by 1913, they embellished it and added a hall, a central hall, and more rooms. And that, excuse me?
It was haunted.
Oh, and then the next photograph on the right was the George Collard house, which was the only one on the map. This is the William Whitfield house, and in the lower right is the type of house that they had when they bought the farm, and it burned not long afterwards. It was this very simple, common house type that was all over this area, Ellis County. And so they built this single gable Gothic, minimal Gothic revival. And those are, I dismantled this house and moved it to the farm to re-erect it, as well as I had done with the George Cunningham house, which was one of the earliest houses in Alma, in Ellis County. And grass fire caught everything. So 3 houses that would have been saved are gone. And of course, that's William Whitfield and his wife. Next slide. Oh, and those are pieces of furniture that are original to that house. This was the Ben and Delma Whitfield house, built in 1885, and that's a picture of Delma Whitfield, and she died in 1902, and so Ben sold the house, sold the gin that they had built, and moved to West Texas, and had a whole other family. And this is, and the Treadaways, the Wrights, Thomas G. and Mattie Treadaway Wright bought the house and moved it to their farm. This is the Baldridge homestead, which was on Main Street in Alma. And those are photographs of the Baldridge family and Mrs. Baldridge in the car. And you can see the Erkenbrack house in the background. Next slide. This was the little more elaborate Victorian cottage of Joe Kohler on the right and of the Redwine family on the left. Next house. This was the Kelly house, which the Kellys came to Alma with the railroad. And Mrs. Kelly managed one of the section houses that took care of the people who built the railroad. And there were sections all along its length. And there were section houses where people who worked on the railroad came and ate and were taken care of. Next house. This is the Slovacek house. It was Miss Mary and Angeline Slovacek. They were next door neighbors, and it was just to the east of the Zerver farm. This is Dan and Elizabeth Mitchell's house, which was on Main Street. And I believe, Linda, you lived in that house. That's the house that grandmother moved in. It looks more on the right, because this was the front, but then when it was moved, the side became the front. And these were Mitchell daughters. This was the Fowler Ruffin Sands house. We believe it was built by Benedict Fowler. It was sold to Harry Ruffin and then to Mr. Sands. And this is the Sands family on the porch. And Bill Carnes identified these people because that is his father and mother at the end. On the right, this was their wedding. They were married that day. This is the T.G. Wright farm, and Thelma Wright gave me these photographs, and the house originally looked like that. The upper left was after they bungalow style came in, and a lot of people modified their house to update it, and so that's what the Wrights did, and that's the Wright family in the upper right and also in the lower right. This was the J.J. and Martha Jane Whitfield Fowler house in 1912. It was built along the railroad track because of electricity becoming available, so they moved from the farm down and built this house. Oh, and then the Bastion house was right next door. And this is the Bastion house that was right next door. Oh, and that desk was, Uncle Ness Bastion built that desk for the gin. So it was in the cotton gin. This was the Harrell house, which was the very next one. And that's the Harrells. This was Tom and Dee McDowell's house, and it was about a half mile south of Alma. But you might know the children who were Thelma McDowell and Minnie McDowell. And in 1918, Tom and Dee, they kept their house, but they moved to Ennis and bought a house on Gaines Street. And Minnie McDowell was the ticket taker, I think, at the theater for many, many years, and that's what Minnie McDowell Park is named for their daughter Minnie. And Thelma worked at Hesser's for many, many years. So lots of people knew Thelma McDowell. They continued to own the farm, and then they rented it to a wonderful family, the Harrison family, who lived there for many, many years. Next. This is the Lindell house that replaced the T-Bow house, which burned. And it's Lewis Perry Lindell in 1915, so it's a bungalow that shed water and was a bungalow concept that was used. This is I.G. and Maggie Whitfield's house, and it was built in 1927 in Alma, and in 1948 it was moved to Ennis. And Debbie Ray Insurance, right across from HEB, was in this house for many years, and the house is still there, so the building's still there on the avenue. Next slide. This is an aerial of Andy and Desi Whitfield's house and farm, and next slide. This was their house before the freeway and their house after the freeway. You can see the highway, the Blacktop Highway, I think this was I think the photograph was made in 38 or so, but then the other photograph was made in 57 once they moved the house back. And then that's them on the right and on the left. This is the Lindell house that was in Alma. And next slide. This was the R.M. Whitfield house that was in Alma, and the R.M. Whitfield family. And I wanted to show you the insides of some of these houses. So that was her living room. Next slide. This was the James Whitfield house with James Whitfield's family. And 3 of them are right here.
Thank you.
Next slide. This was W.J. and Nadine Trudaway Benton's house, built in 1954. And that's the Benton family over to the lower right. And that's Jimmy and Jackie on the horse. And that's Beverly, the oldest sister, on the right. They used to have a, I'm trying to think of the word for it. It was a building above a building, a garage apartment. Yeah, that's what it was. And then this was my parents' house, which my sister and brother and my sister-in-law who is here, and my parents, and Van, Bruce, Richard, and Rosemary. So Richard's in the photograph too. So the next slide is about veterans and heroes. Alma had its share of heroes, and you'd be surprised that newspaper is from 1943, and it's an Ennis Daily News that had all of the men who served in the military during the war, because the war was going on. And the man in the lower left, I guess kind of upper left with the flags, that was Wendell Whitfield, and in front of him you can see the Purple Heart and the Silver Star, which he won. He also had a Bronze Star, which has been lost. But General Patton actually pinned those on him, George Patton. And the reason we know that for sure is that he was at our house one Easter Sunday, and it was the first time we ever got him to talk about the war. And he started telling these stories, and he told us how, yeah, he knew Patton. Patton pinned these medals on him. So I thought that was really neat. The photograph in the right, upper right, is of the Anthony Agert Whitfield family, and I'm going to thank Thelma Pearl right now, Pearl, for letting me copy that photograph, because you can see two soldiers in that photograph, and one of them, Gilbert, spent quite a bit of time in a prisoner of war camp, and the other one, Clarence Whitfield, moved back to, and well, actually both of them survived and came back, and Clarence Whitfield is the other one. The man in the center, you probably all have heard of. There's a historic marker out in the courtyard to Jack Lummis. You probably didn't know that Jack Lummis was from Alma. You probably didn't know that his sister Thelma Lummis is who gave me a lot of the photographs. And at some point, I'm not sure when, the Lummises moved to Ennis and went to school. Almost everybody at Alma school only went to 10th grade. And after 10th grade, Ennis school only went to 11th grade. But for that last year of graduation, you would go to Ennis. But anyhow, the Lummises moved, but they were originally from Alma. And so we're claiming him too. I looked him up on the internet, and when I saw that he was a native of Galveston, I thought, well, by golly, we can claim him too. These are soldiers from World War I, and they're all Alma soldiers. These are soldiers from World War II. Actually, if you could go back to the one previous, one of the soldiers that I don't have on here, I think is very poignant because he is on the Arizona right now. His bones or his remains are on the Arizona. He was Mr. and Mrs. Rush's son, Jim. And Jim was 21 years old, and he happened to be stationed at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. And we all know what happened. But that's where I thought it was neat, because the Rushes, I don't have any photographs of their store or of them or anything, but I knew that their son was on the Arizona. Okay, next. The Alma Cemetery. Who would have thought that we would have a photograph of someone being carried to the cemetery? But Eva Rogers had this photograph on the left. And then in the center, is a funeral notice, which they used to do in 1917 when Uncle Ness Bastian died. His wife sent out these notices in the center. And then on the right is a memorial card to great-great-grandmother who died in 1905, I believe. Well, the Alma Cemetery is close to my heart, and we've done a lot of work out there. And one of the things that we did, David, my sister Rosemary, and I went out and started re-erecting markers, and then the city of Alma got behind it, and they have really, really done wonderful things there. This is the map that we had made of pinpointing where all the graves were with push pins that we knew, and we had, I think, 55 graves that we knew that were marked. Or that one of the things that they used to do is they planted flowers on graves, and irises migrate, but jonquils don't. And so when you could go to the cemetery and see a line of jonquils, you would know that that's where a grave was. So because of the jonquils, we were able to identify where the Erkenbracks were buried. When I was a child, my grandmother and Miss Mary and Aunt Josie and probably y'all and I can't remember who the other ladies were, probably Miss Rush, would pull a little red wagon with hose and tools for cleaning the graves out through Aunt Josie's pasture, which was the quickest way to get to the Alma Cemetery and clean graves. And that's the way the cemetery used to be maintained. And there were beautiful roses out there, just amazing roses. And irises and vinca and all kinds of flowering plants. But now we have it cleaned, and this is what it looks like now. I should also mention that at times of the year, the grass was 3.5 feet tall. So I want to mention that Chris Messapelli made the Alma Cemetery sign for us, and we really appreciate that. David, if you'd go on to the next slide. These are some of the tombstones that are out at the Alma Cemetery. And when we were out there working, we took a shovel or a hoe or something, and we thought we were cleaning a footstone. And it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And lo and behold, it was this full slab ledger stone, they called it, which has a poem imprinted in the concrete. And, anyhow, we found 5 of them at the Alma Cemetery. Next photo. Well, in 1976, there was a spirit of looking back because of the bicentennial. And that is when I started putting these pictures together, and that is when Alma started having reunions. But in 1978, I took my little camera, and these are photographs from the 1978 Alma reunion. So you can see how many people were there. And in 1991, the city of Alma paid to put up an historic marker, which I'm greatly appreciative of. And this is that marker, which still stands down there. We're planning 2 more markers. The Willow Pond marker has been approved by the Texas Historic Commission, and I believe it's at the Foundry now, but they say it'll be up to a year before it arrives. And then after that, the next marker will be for the cemetery. Okay, in 1983, I mailed out this Christmas card, and it's a folding card of which fit in like an envelope of the iconic structures that were in Alma. And I want to say at this time in closing that peace and blessings and the from and to that special place that was and is Alma, Texas. Thank you.